2025 I'm setting off on my biggest Balkan adventure yet. Join me on a 6,700 kilometer journey across Germany, Austria, Slovenia into Bosnia, where I will taking part in the Bosnia Rally 2025. After the rally, the adventure continues along the TranseuroTrail Bosnia, all the way into Montenegro, then onwards to Albania and northern Greece. There I will visit the ancient city of Pella, the birthplace of Alexander the Great, before looping back northwest through North Macedonia into Kosovo. Our journey begins on a beautiful sunny day. My faithful Himalayan 411 rolls out of the garage and the adventure finally begins. My first destination is Kupres in Bosnia, around 1,500 kilometers away via scenic country roads. Kupres is the starting point of the Bosnia Rally, an event I already took part in back in 2023. I've been looking forward to returning, but this time the rally is only one chapter of a much bigger Balkan expedition. After about 150 kilometers of beautiful backroads, it's time for the first break. A little later, it's also time to refuel before continuing towards Bavaria. After covering more than 500 kilometers, I begin searching for a place to spend the night. It takes a while, but eventually I discover something familiar, the very same campsite where I stayed in 2023 on my way to the Bosnia Rally. What a coincidence! It's a fantastic place. You can ride straight in, there's plenty of space to hang a hammock, and it's perfect for setting up camp. Before long, my campsite is ready and I spend the rest of the evening enjoying the peaceful atmosphere on the Bavarian forest. The next morning, after a restful night, I wake up and start packing my camp. First things first, coffee. Once everything is packed away, I'm ready to hit the road again. The journey continues along Bavaria's beautiful country roads towards Passau, before heading south-southeast. Eventually it's time for a breakfast, so I stop at a cozy roadside cafe for something to eat and, of course, another cup of coffee. Not much later, I reach the Austrian border and continue towards Linz and Wels. After a quick fuel stop, the weather changes. Rain begins to fall, the roads become slippery and temperatures drop down as I approach the Alps. Fortunately, the rain eases off after a while, giving me the chance for another short break. Soon enough, however, the rain returns as I cross into Slovenia. Not long afterward, I'm already in Croatia. Slovenia turned out to be just a very short stretch of the journey. As the day comes to an end, it's time to look for a hotel. Unfortunately, the options on booking.com are disappointing, either far too expensive or simply unsuitable. So I kept riding until I finally reached Zagreb. Later that evening, my search is finally successful, and I find a room in the Hotel Phoenix just outside Zagreb. The following morning I leave the hotel southeast of Zagreb. Since the hotel doesn't offer breakfast, my first mission is to find a nice cafe and catch up on both breakfast and coffee. Croatia's country roads are a pleasure to ride. The weather is perfect and covering the next few kilometers is pure enjoyment. Eventually it's time to stock up my supplies, so I stop at the supermarket to buy drinks and food for the next stage of the trip. A few hours later I reach the Bosnian border. Several cars and motorcycles are waiting in line, but like every motorcyclist I can carefully pass the queue. Who wants to stand in the blazing sun? Crossing into Bosnia is quick and completely hassle-free. I continue along Bosnia's peaceful country roads until, completely unexpectedly, disaster strikes. Whether I was distracted for just a moment or simply unlucky, I hit an enormous pothole at around 55 or 50 kilometers per hour. The impact launches me out of the saddle. The bike was thrown into the rut and I end up crashing into the bushes on the left side of the road. As you can imagine, there are casualties. Both of my cameras have been ripped off and the motorcycle has suffered some damage as well. At first I don't really feel any pain, so my priority is checking the bike. Fortunately, the damage isn't too serious. The handguard is broken, the luggage has been torn loose and the handlebars are slightly bent, causing the bike to pull to the left. A few kilometers later I stop again to calm down and make some repairs. Luckily, my Moscow Moto luggage absorbed most of the impact, so nothing important inside was damaged. My brand new Revit riding pants weren't so lucky. They now have several holes. Thankfully, I was wearing knee braces underneath, so my knee escaped without injuries. The handlebars are still bent, so I loosen the front end, straighten everything as best I can and remount my camera mount. Once the motorcycle is rideable again, I take a couple of ibuprofen and continue my journey. By now I can definitely feel my hip. I hit the ground hard and I'm sure it's going to turn into one massive bruise. Thankfully everything else seems fine, including my ribs. So I continue west of Banja Luka toward my destination. As I approach Kupres, the landscape changes dramatically. Immediately I feel at home. I knew this area well and after nearly 1,500 kilometers in just 3 days, I'm genuinely happy to have made it. My destination is the Hotel Kupres, which will serve as my base camp for the next 6 days as the Bosnia Rally 2025 starts nearby. How both my Himalayan and I performed during the rally won't be part of this film. That story deserves a video of its own. I will be releasing a separate Bosnia Rally 2025 video soon. So welcome back. As you can see, both my Himalayan and I survived the Bosnia Rally. Behind us lie around 1,500 kilometers of rally stages, and despite all the challenges, I'm feeling great. With beautiful weather ahead, it's finally time to continue my journey on the TranseuroTrail Bosnia. The trail passes directly through Kupres before heading southeast. My first destination is Ramsko Jezero, a stunning lake with a small peninsula that offers an incredible view. After spending a while enjoying the beautiful viewpoint, I continue my journey along the Tet. The Bosnian section of the TranseuroTrail consists mainly of gravel roads, but as you will soon see, it also features plenty of demanding rocky terrain. As the kilometers pass, the landscape changes constantly, and it's easy to understand why this region is one of my favorite places in Europe. Soon the next highlight is waiting for me. The climb to the Mount Plokno, one of the Bosnia's highest peaks at more than 2,200 meters above sea level. The higher I climb, the more demanding the trails become. The gravel gets looser and several rocky switchbacks require enough momentum to make it through without stopping halfway. It's certainly not an easy ascent, but every meter is rewarded with breathtaking scenery. Eventually, after almost 10 kilometers of climbing, I finally reached the summit, almost 2,200 meters above the sea level. Absolutely incredible. Finally, I'm on the block now. After 10 kilometers uphill, I'm finally here. Absolute incredible. Because the road ends here, I will have to ride all the way back down the same route, but with scenery like this, that's definitely not a problem. Back at the foot of the mountain, I continue southeast. For kilometer after kilometer, the trail winds through spectacular open landscapes that almost look like something straight out of a Western movie. After several hours of riding, I finally reached the city of Mostar, famous for its scorching summer temperatures. Temperatures around 40 degrees Celsius are completely normal here. Surrounded by mountains, the heat becomes trapped inside the valley, making the city feel even hotter. I simply ride through Mostar, refuel the bike and immediately start looking for somewhere to cool off. Soon I discover a small road leading down to the Neretva river. Maybe I will find a nice place for a swim. And sure enough, I discover a perfect little swimming spot. The crystal clear water is absolutely stunning. After cooling down, I continue for a few more kilometers before reaching my hotel for the night. The hotel itself is quite simple, but its location couldn't be better. It sits directly beside the Neretva river, and the owner has even created a small natural swimming area by damming one of the river's side channels. The water is freezing cold, so instead of going for another swim, I simply dip my feet into the water and spend the evening enjoying the peaceful view. The next day my goal is to reach Montenegro. There are still around 175 kilometers of off-road riding ahead of me, making this one of the longest riding days of the trip. The trail first leads me towards the town of Konjic. One of the highlights marked along the Bosnian Tet is Tito's bunker, the massive underground nuclear shelter built for the former Yugoslav leader. I would really like to visit it. Unfortunately, I arrive at exactly the wrong time. Rather than waiting for several hours, I decide to keep riding. Soon I reach a toll road. The entrance fee? Just €1. I'm curious to see what's waiting for me. After a short section of asphalt, the route climbs back into the mountains on another off-road trail. At the top, I'm greeted by an enormous high plateau stretching as far as the eye can see. The landscape here is simply magnificent. After a while, I stop for another short break and check the route ahead before continuing along the edge of a mountain range. The terrain becomes increasingly open until it almost resembles a vast steppe. This section of the TranseuroTrail is simply too long to ride in a single day, especially considering that my overall destination is northern Greece. On a journey like this, it's impossible to ride every single kilometers of the TranseuroTrail. Sometimes you simply have to skip certain sections in order to stay on schedule. Even on paved roads, the distances feel endless. The temperature keeps climbing and I'm getting seriously thirsty. Eventually I reach a gas station where I fill up both the motorcycle and myself with a cold drink. The place is incredibly busy as participants of the Balkan rally have also stopped here. So after a short break I continue riding in search of a quiet, shady place to rest. before long, only a few kilometers remain before I reach the border of Montenegro. The temperature has now climbed to almost 40 degrees, making the border crossing particularly exhausting. Standing in line under the blazing sun quickly drains every bit of energy. Completely exhausted, I stop beside a nearby river to cool down before crossing into Montenegro. Little do I know, the biggest surprise of the day is still waiting for me. As I cool off beside the river near the Montenegrin border, something feels wrong. My face is burning, my eyes are burning. At first I assume it's simply a bad sunburn after spending the entire day riding in temperatures close to 40 degrees Celsius. Even splashing cold river water into my eyes doesn't bring much relief. Only later, back at my motorcycle, do I discover the real cause. One of the worst things that could happen has happened. My bear spray has exploded inside one of my luggage bags. Without realizing it, I would touch the leaking spray with my gloves and then rubbed it straight into my eyes. It burns like hell. The inside of my luggage is completely contaminated, and even the outside of several bags is covered with irritating spray. Fortunately, it was only one compartment that took the full impact, but cleaning everything will keep me busy for days. Despite the mess, I continue my journey into Montenegro. Because of the intense heat, I'm looking for a campsite close to a river where I can cool off, and more importantly, wash all my clothes and luggage. Before long, I find exactly what I was hoping for. The Etno village camp is a small rafting campsite located directly beside a beautiful mountain river. The location couldn't be better. I set up camp, although this time there are no suitable trees for my hammock, so I pitch my tarp as a small tent instead. Later that evening I head down to the river. I wash my riding gear, clean as much of the bear spray I can, and simply enjoy the peaceful surroundings. The next morning greets me with another beautiful day. My freshly washed clothes are hanging outside to dry, and before setting off, I treat myself to breakfast at the campsite's small restaurant. With plenty of energy, I'm ready for another day on the TranseuroTrail Montenegro. First, the route follows a narrow country road before turning back onto gravel. Initially, the riding is easy, but gradually the trail becomes rougher again with loose rocks scattered across the track. Still, the scenery is absolutely breathtaking. Endless open landscapes stretch to the horizon, making me feel as if I'm riding through an old western movie. High up in the mountains, I meet two German motorcyclists. They warn me about a particularly rocky section further ahead and tell me it's going to be extremely difficult. Well, there's only one way to find out. The Balkans are well known for their rocky trails, and Montenegro is certainly no exception. Loose rocks are simply part of the adventure here. In the end, this section turns out to be much easier than expected. Yes, it's rocky, but perfect manageable. Soon the trail leads into beautiful forests, adding even more variety to the ride. It's not just endless gravel plains. The route constantly changes between forests, mountain ridges, and wide open valleys. As the trail continues south toward Podgorica, another feeling slowly begins to grow. When you're completely alone out here, far away from civilization, it's impossible not to think about what might happen if something goes wrong. Out here, help would take a very long time to arrive. At the same time, that's exactly what makes these landscapes so special. This incredible feeling of freedom. Eventually I reach another spectacular viewpoint overlooking the mountains. To be honest, Montenegro gives me a slightly different feeling than Bosnia. Everything seems even more remote, even more isolated. Perhaps it's simply because this is my first time riding here. After a while, the trail briefly returns to asphalt before leading back onto another wonderful off-road section. Once again, I find myself completely alone in the nature. The sense of freedom out here is incredible. Eventually, the heat catches up with me once more, and I stop for a longer break. Even sitting here alone in the middle of nowhere, it's hard not to wonder whether a bear might also be taking a break somewhere nearby. It's a strange feeling. Eventually, I continue riding towards the Albanian border. This time I don't wait in line at customs under the blazing sun. Instead, I carefully ride to the front of the queue, making the border crossing much quicker. Crossing into Albania is completely straightforward. Just after entering the country, a local man waves me over and offers me an ice-cold Coke from his refrigerator. A small gesture. It's exactly the kind of hospitality that makes traveling so special. A little later I reach the next town and begin looking for an ATM. I need some local currency, but there's only a small problem. My eSIM still isn't working properly. So I have no internet connections and no way of checking the current exchange rate. After one failed attempt, I finally managed to withdraw some cash. With that problem solved, I continue riding through Albania in the warm evening light. Now all that's left is to find somewhere to spend the night. Good that my mobile connection finally starts working again, allowing me to search for some accommodation. I eventually book a private guest house. Normally I prefer hotels with a proper reception because I don't like the feeling as if I'm intruding into someone's home. But this family turns out to be incredibly welcoming. The room is small and simple, yet the hospitality more than makes up for it. The view over the gardens is beautiful. Even more impressive is the family's young daughter, probably around 10 years old, who speaks excellent English and happily takes over almost the entire conversation. It's a wonderful end to another unforgettable day. The following morning, after a delicious breakfast with homemade honey, jam and pancakes, I say goodbye to my hosts and continue my adventure. After just few kilometers on paved roads, I finally reach my first off-road section of the TranseuroTrail Albania. The gravel is well maintained, there are only a few rocky sections, and the ride is smooth and enjoyable. The road winds through the mountains, offering spectacular scenery around every corner. After several off-road kilometers, the trail transitions onto one of the most beautiful mountain roads I've ridden so far. As I continue, however, I suddenly hear a rattling noise coming from my bike. I pull over to investigate. It doesn't take long to find the problem. One side of the headlight housing has cracked. At first, I assume it's simply the result of the countless vibrations from both the Bosnia rally this year and my previous rally in 2023. But after taking a closer look, I realized the real cause. After several crashes, the crash bars around the fuel tank have bent ever so slightly, putting constant pressure on the plastic headlight housing until it finally gave way. Fortunately, it's nothing that can't be fixed. Out comes the duct tape, some silicone sealant, and a handful of zip ties. Sometimes that's all you need. A few minutes later, the repair is finished and the bike is ready for many more kilometers. After several more hours on the road, it's time for another fuel stop and another short break. Not long afterward, I arrive at the border with North Macedonia. Interestingly, the country's name has quite a story behind it. Following the breakup of Yugoslavia, the new state originally wanted to call itself Macedonia. However, Greece objected because the name is closely linked to the ancient kingdom of Macedon, the homeland of Alexander the Great and his father Philip II. That historical kingdom extended far beyond the borders of today's North Macedonia, reaching into parts of modern Greece and even Albania. Eventually, the compromise name North Macedonia was adopted. Soon I'm riding the TranseuroTrail North Macedonia. The trail is enjoyable to ride, challenging enough to stay interesting but never overly difficult. Eventually I pass through Ohrid. The city itself is busy and crowded, so I don't stay long. Instead I follow a smaller road leading high above the city to a spectacular viewpoint overlooking Lake Ohrid. The panoramic view is absolutely stunning. One of those places where it's impossible not to stop for a while and simply take it all in. As the afternoon turns into evening, another familiar question comes up: where I'm going to spend the night. Despite riding for quite some time, I haven't found a place that really feels right, so I decide to continue a little longer. That decision rewards me with another fantastic off-road trail. It climbs steadily into the mountains before finally reaching Galicia National Park. The evening light transforms the entire landscape. Golden sunlight illuminates the mountains while the trail winds gently down into the valley. It's one of those magical moments that make long-distance travel so rewarding. But daylight is fading fast. Soon I have no choice but to find somewhere to camp. There's just one problem. National parks like this are home to bears. That thought never really leaves your mind. Some people might laugh about it, but when you're completely alone in the wilderness, these are exactly these kinds of things you start thinking about. Especially because I no longer have any bear spray. Finding a campsite suddenly becomes a careful balancing act between comfort and safety. Eventually, I leave the trail and search for a secluded spot hidden away from the main track. I avoid hanging my hammock between trees. Instead, I climb higher onto an exposed ridge. Behind me rises a large mountain blocking the prevailing wind. Hopefully, any wildlife down in the valleys won't be able to catch my scent. Whether that theory actually works or not, who knows? But it certainly helps me sleep a little better. At least in theory. The campsite itself is far from comfortable. I pitch my tarp as low as possible to keep it hidden from the trail. The ground is covered with rocks, making it difficult to find a level place to sleep. Comfort clearly isn't today's priority. Safety is. The next morning, I am relieved to report that no bears paid me a visit during the night. Unfortunately, I didn't sleep particularly well anyway. At some point during the night, my sleeping pad developed a leak. The rocky ground had punctured it. As a result, I wake up sore, tired, and more than ready for a cup of coffee. I also skipped dinner that night before. Opening cans of tuna or sausages in bear country didn't seem like the smartest idea. So after breakfast, just coffee this time, I pack everything up and continue along the trail. Only 8 kilometers to 10 kilometers later, the off-road section ends, bringing me back onto asphalt. From there, I head toward Bitola. Along that way, I stop to refuel, buy a few snacks and drinks, and finally give my bike chain some much-needed lubrication. It's been a while. The chain is starting to look dry. Back on the TranseuroTrail North Macedonia, the riding remains enjoyable and relatively straightforward. Many kilometers pass before I finally reach my next destination, the Greek border. Welcome to Hellas, a new country, a new chapter, and another unforgettable adventure awaits. As soon as I cross the border, I find myself on the TranseuroTrail Greece. This region is very different from the Greece most people know from postcards. Northern Greece is dominated by rugged mountains, remote valleys, and an incredible amount of history. It was here, in the ancient kingdom of Macedon, that one of history's greatest military leaders was born. After a while I reached the city of Edessa. By now I'm getting seriously hungry. After days of riding gravel roads and quick roadside snacks, it's time for a proper meal. Luckily, finding good food is never a problem in Greece. I stop at a traditional tavern, enjoying an excellent lunch. And once again, I remember why Greek cuisine is famous all over the world. With my energy restored, I continue riding through the afternoon heat. The temperature has climbed back to around 40 degrees Celsius. Eventually, I reach New Pella, where I check into my new hotel for the night. The following morning starts with a generous breakfast before I head toward one of the places I've been looking forward to visiting the most, the ancient city of Pella. Today, the modern city itself is fairly small and quiet with around 7,000 inhabitants. At first glance, there's little to suggest its extraordinary past. Yet reminders of its most famous son can be found everywhere. Statues, monuments, historical references. Of course, my real destination is the archaeological site itself. This was once the capital of the ancient kingdom of Macedon. It was here that Alexander the Great was born at 356 BC, the son of King Philip II. When Philip was assassinated, Alexander was only 20 years old. Despite his youth, he inherited the throne and almost immediately began fulfilling his father's vision. His campaign against the Persian Empire became one of the greatest military expeditions in history. Over the following years, he defeated the Persians, conquered an empire stretching from Greece all the way to India, and forever changed the ancient world. Yet, despite all his victories, Alexander never returned home. He died in Babylon at just 33 years of age, most likely from a severe fever. Walking through these ruins of his birthplace is a fascinating experience. It's remarkable to stand in a place that shaped one of the history's most influential figures. After exploring the archaeological site, I decide it's time to cool off. About 50 kilometers away, I discover Kovarino Beach. It looks promising. When I arrive, I'm pleasantly surprised. It isn't one of the crowded tourist beaches. Instead, it seems to be a place mostly visited by locals, exactly what I was hoping for. The sea is clear, the atmosphere is relaxed, and the water temperature around 26 degrees Celsius is absolute perfect. I spent nearly 3 hours here swimming, relaxing, and simply enjoying a slower pace before continuing my journey. Later that afternoon I ride towards the Olympus Mountains. On the way I stop in the small town of Litoshero, often considered the gateway to Mount Olympus. After one last iced coffee I begin thinking about where to spend the night. Fortunately, I discover a nearby campsite. Or at least what I think is a campsite. To my surprise, it's actually more of a peaceful picnic area than a traditional campground. There's no more major infrastructure, no reception, no facility, just nature. And honestly, that's exactly what makes it so special. I set up camp and spent the evening enjoying the surroundings. The next morning begins a little earlier than planned. Several stray dogs spend most of the night barking nearby, making sleep rather difficult. Still, after a coffee, I'm excited to continue towards the Olympus Mountains. This section marks my entry onto section 7 of the TranseuroTrail, Greece. Looking at the map, the terrain appears fairly challenging. I'm curious to find out what awaits. Before long I reached an information board and spot one of the towering peaks rising above the landscape. Could that be the Mount Olympus? It's surprisingly difficult to say. Ancient sources don't clearly identify a single summit. Historically, the name Olympus referred to the entire mountain massif, rather than one specific peak. So whether I'm actually looking at the legendary home of the Greek gods, it's impossible to know of certain. Either way, the scenery is magnificent. Soon the road turns back into gravel. Despite what the map suggests, the trail is very good. The morning air is pleasantly cool, the sunlight is soft, and riding through these mountains is an absolute joy. Kilometer after kilometer I follow the trail through forests and mountain landscapes until I eventually return to civilization. After a long lunch break, it's time to change direction. From here my route turns north once again. My next destination, Kosovo. To get there, I first have to cross North Macedonia once more. It's a long ride. Hundreds of kilometers on ordinary roads under relentless summer heat. The only solution is to stop regularly for cold drinks and short breaks. Eventually, near Tetovo, I reach my hotel for the evening. After checking in and unpacking my luggage, I head out to a local restaurant for dinner. A perfect ending to another long day on the road. The following morning I continue towards the border. Crossing into Kosovo is straightforward. The only difference is that this is the first country where I'm asked to present my bike's green card insurance and purchase additional local insurance. Within minutes the paperwork is done. And just like that, I'm riding the TranseuroTrail Kosovo. Only a few kilometers after crossing the border, I pull over for a very special reason. Today, my faithful Himalayan 411 reaches an important milestone, 50,000 kilometers. Considering I owned the bike for less than 3 years, that's a remarkable achievement. Over those kilometers, it has carried me across countless countries, mountain ranges, gravel roads and adventures without ever letting me down. It's proven to be an incredibly reliable bike. Of course, I have to capture the moment before continuing my journey. Soon afterwards, the trail climbs into the mountains once again. After an exciting climb and descent, I continue across Kosovo. For many kilometers, the route follows dusty country roads stretching through the countryside. As always, there comes a point when both the bike and the rider needs attention. I stop for fuel, grab something to eat. Navigating across Kosovo turns out to be more complicated than expected. The countless small mountain roads rarely lead directly toward my destination. Instead, they wind around valleys and mountain ridges, making progress slower than anticipated. To avoid retracing my steps, I constantly set new waypoints on my navigation system, working my way from the location to the next. Finally, I reach northern Montenegro and enter Durmitor National Park. Almost immediately, I remember why this region is considered one of the most beautiful mountain landscapes in Europe. As the sun begins to set, the entire landscape is transformed. Golden light washes across the mountains, while long shadows stretch through the valleys. The scenery is simply breathtaking. Some sections of the road hidden in the shade become surprisingly cold. After all, I'm riding close to 2000 meters above sea level. Just a few bends later, where the evening sun still reaches the mountainside, the temperature feels wonderfully pleasant again. Every kilometer reminds me that journeys like this are worth every bit of effort. Thousands of kilometers, long riding days, heat, rain, problems, even crashes. Moments like this make it all worthwhile. As evening approaches, it's time to find one final place to spend the night. While checking my map, I discover a small campsite marked nearby. Curious, I ride toward it. At first I'm a little surprised. It's nothing more than a wide alpine meadow surrounded by towering mountains. But the more I look around, the more I realize it's actually the perfect place to spend the night. Several 4x4s have clearly used it before, yet it still feels wonderfully remote. The peace and silence here are incredible. I set up camp one last time. Over the past weeks, I've crossed 6 countries, covered thousands of kilometers, tackled demanding off-road trails, experienced incredible hospitality, overcome challenges, and discovered some of Europe's most spectacular landscapes. From the forests of Bavaria to the mountains of Bosnia, the vast plateaus of Montenegro, the welcoming villages of Albania, the ancient history of Greece, and the rugged backcountry of Kosovo. This has been an unforgettable adventure. If you ever have the opportunity to explore this part of Europe, I can highly recommend it. The Balkans are without a doubt one of the most beautiful and diverse regions I ever traveled through. Thank you for joining me on this adventure. I hope you have enjoyed this journey as much as I enjoyed living it. Until next time, ride safe, take care, and I will see you in the next adventure.